Let's talk books now, and it's been 8 years since Erin Morgenstern wrote the critically acclaimed international bestseller, The Night Circus. Now, that book was translated into 37 languages. Since then, though, she's been quiet. That is, until now. She's finally published her highly anticipated second book, The Starless Sea. And our resident book reviewer, Andrea van Wyk, is here to tell us all about it. Good morning to you, Andrea.
Morning,
now,
Sally.
You have read The Starless Sea. Is it as good as The Night Circus?
It is absolutely marvelous, and it is the perfect book if you're a book lover, and I'll tell you why. So this is a piece of metafiction, in other words, story about a story and stories within stories. So the main character, Zachary, is a student. He goes to his university library, takes out a random book of short stories, and he starts reading. And one of the stories is an episode from his childhood. How on earth did that happen? So he starts investigating, and during his investigations he meets a young woman who paints doors on walls. And if you go through this door, it becomes a magic door. And it's this Alice in Wonderland down the rabbit hole kind of scene where he goes into this door and he discovers this underground library. Well, it's even more than a library. It's just rooms upon rooms and hallways upon hallways of books. So it's just absolutely marvelous if you're a book lover, and he needs to protect this library from people who wish to destroy it. So the fact that you've got these stories within the stories, so you've got these short stories from different books that are in the library in between the rest of the story, absolutely marvelous, perfect if you're a book lover.
It sounds like an absolute feast of a read. I believe there's also a bit of a love story woven into it.
Absolutely. So one of the stories within the stories is of a man who meets another woman, but from almost like from a different time. Because the library is so magic, you can go into almost like different time zones or different eras, and he meets this young woman with whom he falls in love. And because they're in different times, they can't be together. So it's quite a star-crossed love, a tragic love story in there as well.
Now, how does it compare to The Night Circus? That was a sort of a fantasy as well about this circus that appeared at night in a sort of a Victorian-era style London. Is it a very different read, or is it exactly what you would sort of expect from her?
Well, you'd expect the fact that it was so fantastical and so magical. So she's kind of stuck with that genre or that feeling, but the story itself is very different. This is more of an adventure, almost like a literary mystery. It's about how we're the main characters in our own stories, and stories are things that change us. They are transformative, and that's what this book does. It transforms you.
It sounds like the kind of book you read where you start slowing down because you don't want it to end.
Absolutely. That's exactly what I've been saying. I don't want this book to end. Well, I didn't want it to end because it's just so beautiful. I think it's definitely the kind of book that you could read once a year.
Sounds absolutely wonderful. I cannot wait to dive in. Let's move now. It's a Nigerian author, I think, Oyinkan Braithwaite, am I right?
Yes.
And her book, My Sister, the Serial Killer. Dark comedy, sounds fantastic.
Absolutely. So, as you said, dark comedy. The story is about a woman called Korede. She's the older sister, and she's a nurse. And her younger sister, Ayula, has this tendency to kill her boyfriend. She stabs them to death. So after she stabs the third one to death, Ayula keeps claiming that this is in self-defense. But once you reach number 3, you become a serial killer, correct?
Right.
So this book is about how blood is thicker than water, but of course water is very difficult to use to get blood out of a carpet. So Korede has to decide, does she stick with her sister through all of this, or what does she do next? And it becomes all the more complicated when Korede is in love with a young doctor. But when Ayula starts dating this doctor, she starts fearing for this doctor's life. So what does she do? Does she warn the doctor? Does she go to the police? Does she keep sticking with her sister? So, and it's quite a short read. It was one of the books on the long list for the Booker Prize, so definitely an acclaimed book as well. But it's an easy read, it's a quick read. I read this within a couple of hours. The text is quite large, but it's just a really fun story to read.
Oh, sounds absolutely marvellous. Thank you so much for bringing us such lovely books to consider for our reading list. That's our resident book reviewer, Andrea van Wyk. Well,